people, and again, everybody is welcome. And before we get started, I have to give you a disclaimer that I'm not a theologian, and I'm not a Bible scholar, and up until probably about a year ago, I would consider myself extremely ignorant of the Scriptures. So that might make some of you feel better, and some of you might be wondering what you signed up for. But the point is, this study is for anybody, no matter what level of experience you have with the Scriptures. I just went to a one-day seminar from Jeff Cavins, the guy that created this Bible study, and it just opened my eyes. And I think that hearing the story will open yours as well. And the Bible study is actually a 24-session study. It's 24 hours. And we're doing it in 8. We're doing the quick version. So the way he kind of describes it is, this is the story of salvation history right here. And we're taking a helicopter ride over the story. So you can kind of see it below you. But you're going to have to get out and walk yourself, You're going to have to get down there and kind of learn the details at home. The way I learn this stuff is I read it, but I also listen to it a lot over and over and over. And the best way for me to learn, at least, is to teach it. So I thank you for allowing me to teach it, but it makes me prepare and really learn this stuff. And I think that's the best way for you to learn, is to take the stuff with you, take it home, and tell the story to your family, tell it to your friends. That's the best way for you to learn. So you can just come to the sessions, listen to the story, and you'll get a lot out of it. You'll learn the story, but it's really meant to set you on a lifetime of learning what the Scriptures are all about. As Catholics, the Bible's like a family heirloom to us. It's the Word of God, and as Catholics, we're not just people of the book, we're people of the Word. And there's two parts to that. There's the Scriptures, the written Word, and then there's the oral Word, the tradition, we call the tradition. And they're both important. But a lot of times as Catholics, we really struggle with the written Word. And the thing about the written Word is that it's inspired by God. The Holy Spirit was with the men over the hundreds of years that read these Scriptures. The same Spirit that was with all those councils that over 400 years decided which books go into the Scriptures. And the same Spirit that is with us today. As I say, come Holy Spirit, let my words be your words. So we have a challenging task ahead of us, but I think you're really going to enjoy this study a lot. So, as Catholics, a lot of times we have this, people see us as being ignorant of the Scriptures. And like I said, I was pretty ignorant of the Scriptures up until about a year ago. I remember when I was in college, and I was at this group called Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I was probably the only Catholic in there. And they always played these Bible races, games and stuff. And my roommate, one day he just started naming the Scriptures from all the books from the beginning. It's like Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus, and he named them all the way to the end. And they look at me and I'm like, well, I'm Catholic, I don't really know the Scriptures, And St. Jerome, whose feast day we celebrated a couple days ago, he once said that to be ignorant of the Scriptures is to be ignorant of Christ. So it's kind of like saying, well, I don't know the Bible, I'm Catholic. It's almost like saying, well, I don't know Christ, I'm Catholic. And it's not so funny when we say it like that. This is the story of salvation history. And if we don't know the story, we really don't know Christ. So we have to get to know this story that we're going to be delving into. And one of the big problems in general is Catholicism in general is huge, And we go through 12 years of, religious education, and we learn all this stuff, and really when we get out, we have this big pile of Catholicism. I think of it like this 10,000-piece puzzle, and all the pieces are all scattered about, and we recognize maybe a couple individual pieces here and there, like, oh, I know who Noah is, or I know who David is, or Abraham, but we have no idea how they all fit together. We've never seen the big picture. We've never seen the big picture. And we don't really know how to get our arms around this whole Catholicism thing, because, we have all these words like transubstantiation and the Immaculate Conception and purgatory, and somebody comes up to us and says, well, I've heard that you Catholics believe in transubstantiation. Where do you get that? We're like, I don't know, I think it was Mr. Reinhardt, 8th grade, I don't know. We don't know where it comes from. We're like, well, I think it's in the pile there somewhere. I don't know, look for yourself. And we have no way of accessing this huge pile of Catholicism. And the answer comes in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. If you don't have a catechism in the Catholic Church, get a catechism, because this catechism of the Catholic Church really breaks down our Catholic faith in a way that we can understand it. It organizes it, and it organizes it into 4 pillars mainly. The first pillar is the creed, and the creed is the story. My kids like those little, usually they're dinosaurs, but they come in these little pills, little packet. And then you go home and you put them in the water, and over a couple of days you just wash them and they expand to like 8,000 times their size. And the kids are all excited. You got this big green dinosaur after a few days. Well, the creed is like that little pill. And the story is that big green dinosaur. And what we're going to be doing here is putting that pill in the water and seeing it grow and getting the big picture of that story. The second pillar in the Catechism is the sacraments and liturgy. The sacraments and liturgy are how we get into the story and how we stay in the story. If you were here for the pancake breakfast, I used that analogy of the holy highway, that road. And the sacrament, baptism is the on-ramp. It gets us into the story. And then all the other sacraments, they keep us in the story. They keep us on the road. The reconciliation when we blow it in the story. So that's why that comes second. And then the third pillar of the Catechism is life in Christ. And that is our personal script in the story. We're all called to be more like Christ. Christ didn't come just to tell us what to do. He showed us what to do. And this third pillar is all about our personal script. We're in a story, and we have a part to play. And that's what the third pillar is. And then the fourth pillar in the Catechism is prayer. Prayer, and personal prayer and community prayer. It's our intimate union with God. That's what prayer is all about. And the important thing to remember about these 4 pillars is that the creed comes first. The creed comes first. Why? Because that is the story. And everything in the Catholic faith assumes that you know the story. We've got to get the story right if we're going to understand, the meaning of our lives, the meaning of our faith, what we're trying to accomplish. We have to know the story. And that's where the problem lies, is as Catholics, most of us don't know the story. Like I said, we know little bits and pieces of the story, but we don't know the whole story. And we're all looking for a story. That's why we love movies. That's why we love songs. That's why these things inspire us, because we're all looking for a story. We're all looking for a purpose and meaning in our own lives. This year for PRE, for the juniors and seniors, I gave them a little questionnaire on the first day of class. And the last question on there is, what are some subjects you'd like to study this year in the Catholic faith? What's most interesting to you? And I had all of them on there, and Mary and the saints and Mass and Scriptures and everything. And and they could circle as many as they wanted. And almost every single one of the students circled, who am I and why am I here? Who am I and why am I here? A lot of psychologists say that, the rise in depression of young people these days comes because they've lost the narrative thread of their life. They don't know why they're here. They don't know what they're trying to accomplish. That's why stories are so important. They want to be part of a story. This past week, on Thursday morning, I woke up all excited because my favorite baseball team, the Tampa Bay Rays, won the wild card on Wednesday night, in a dramatic fashion. And I got up on Thursday and I said to Kristen, I'm like, the Rays won the wild card. And she said, what's a wild card? And I explained to her, well, in baseball, 4 teams make the playoffs in each league. There's the 3 division winners, and then 1 extra team gets to get in. That's the wild card. She said, well, how many teams are there? I said, well, there's about 28, 30 teams. So 4 from each league make it. She's doing the math, and she's like, so about 1 in 4 get in. So that's like a 25% chance. I'm like, what's the big deal? She's like, that's not that big of an odds. Because she doesn't know the story. She doesn't know the story. She hasn't followed the Rays since April, and then 163 games long. She doesn't know the story. She doesn't know that they started off 1-8. And she doesn't know that in the beginning of September, they were 9 games behind. And no team in the history of baseball, which is more than 100 years old, has ever come back from 9 games behind in the month of September. And she doesn't know that the Rays payroll is $40 million, and the Yankees and the Red Sox payroll is like $200 million. 500 or 5 times more than the Tampa Bay Rays. That'd be like New Eagle being in the same division as Findlay High School in Toledo or one of these big Division I schools and expected to compete. She doesn't know. And she doesn't know that it came down to the last game of the season and that the Rays were losing by 7 runs with 1.5 innings left. And she doesn't know that the team they needed to lose, the Red Sox, were winning in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs and nobody on base. And somehow the Red Sox lost and the Rays came back from 7 runs and won. She doesn't know that. She thinks the chances are 1 in 4. And I got up the next day and I saw a news article about a sports writer, and he said the chances of the Tampa Bay Rays making the playoffs this year, after everything they had to go through, was 1 in 278 million. He did the calculations. 1 in 278 million. I mean, to put that in perspective, the Browns have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl. I'll try to get at least one Browns joke in each talk for you. But if she just wakes up and says, okay, 1 in 4 teams make it, she doesn't know the story. She doesn't know. And we have a story that is, the chances of this story actually happening, the chances of a God coming down and making himself man and dying to fulfill all these covenants that his people have broken, to somehow find a way to get us to heaven, the chances are less than 1 in 278 million. The chances of this story fitting together so perfectly, all these covenants that we're going to see, and all these things that happened in the Old Testament, that if we don't know the story, we're just like, oh, that was nice of him to come die on the cross for us. Because we don't know what he had to go through. We don't know what he was trying to accomplish because we don't know the story. We've got to know the story. When I was in high school, there was the movie Titanic was out. I was a senior in high school, and I remember this. It was really awkward. I was a senior, and I was sitting in class one day. I wasn't doing very good in the whole dating scene. And there was a girl in my class next to me, and she was flipping through pictures of her friends, senior pictures. And there was one girl in there I didn't recognize. She's from another city. And I was like, who's that? And she got all excited. She's like, oh, that's my friend Cavins. You guys would make a great couple. I'm going to set you up. And I was like, whoa. Just trying to make conversation, She's like, no, it'll be great. I was like, I'm not really good at talking to people I know. I was really shy, really introverted. I don't think I could go out with somebody I never met before. She's like, no, it'll be fine. We'll double date. I'll go with you. I'll stir the conversation. It'll be great. She's like, you promise? I was like, I promise. All right. About 2 hours before the date, she calls me up. I can't make it. She promised. So I go pick up this girl I've never met, and I knew she wanted to see Titanic. And it had been out in theaters for probably 2 months. And we get to the movie theater, and there's this line all the way out the door. And we get to the front, and they're like, oh, we're sold out. And it's been 2 months since it's been out. So I looked at her, and I was like, well, what do you want to do? You want to go to a different movie? You want to go to a different theater? And she said, I don't care. And it took me 10 years of dating before I realized that in women language, I don't care really means the obvious choice should be obvious to you. Or to leave it up to you to choose the obvious choice, choose wisely. So I decided, all right, we'll go to another theater. I know she really wants to see this movie. So we get to another theater, long line. We get to the front of the line, the ticket guy says, there's good news and there's bad news. I can sell you 2 tickets to Titanic. But the bad news is this theater is almost full, and I can't guarantee you're going to get to sit together. What to do? I don't care. All right, obvious choice should be obvious to me. In this situation, I don't know what the obvious choice is. But what I did was probably not the obvious choice. I said, all right, we'll take the tickets. I don't care if we sit together or not. We ended up sitting together in the first row, 3-hour movie. We watched it like this. But my point is, why is this movie sold out 2 months after it came out? I mean, that's unheard of. And what they found out was that teenage girls, ages 13 and 19, some of them went and saw this movie 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And Jeff Cavins, who does this, he talks about this movie. He's like, well, I did a study on this. National study, quite expensive. I wanted to figure out why did these teenage girls go to this movie 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And he said, you know what the results were? We found out that women, young women in our culture, really like boats I was surprised too. No, you know that's not the answer. They are in search of a story. A story. You remember the story in the Titanic? Jack is in, he makes sure that Rose gets up on the plank, and then, she's crying. Jack sinks to the bottom of the lamp. They pull the bottom, he just sinks. And all the women in the theater are just bawling their eyes out. Because here's a man that is willing to sacrifice for his love, willing to give his life for his love. And I'm telling you, we have a much better story. We have a much better story, the greatest story ever told, with the greatest hero that ever lived, and the greatest sacrifice that was ever made, and the greatest love that ever existed. And if you can't get into this story, there's no story that you will ever get into. This is the story. And the problem is, we all want the story. The problem is, we just don't know how to access the story. We pick up a Bible and, as Catholics, I'm probably pretty sure that most of us at some point in our life come up with this idea of, I'm going to read the Bible this year, cover to cover, I'm going to read it. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to read it. They told me I'm a good Catholic. To be a good Catholic, I got to read the Bible. I'm going to read this week. So we get all excited. It's like October. We go out and we buy a brand new Bible because the old one doesn't work. And we like to buy things. And then we got our Bible. We're all ready. And now we got to wait till January 1st. Because that's when we start everything. January 1st. So January 1st, we're all excited. We open it up. In the beginning, God created. And it's more exciting if you read it in that movie trailer voice. And if I can get Father Tim to put the Bible on tape, man, I could read the Bible every day. He's got that movie trailer voice. We get all excited and we do really well for about 2 months, and then we get to March and we quit. And why do we quit? Because we're in Leviticus. And we're reading things like, thou shalt not sleep with thy sister, or things like that. And we're like, what is going on here? And then sooner or later we push it aside and we're like, you know what? Don't need it. No thanks. Why? Because we lost the story. Because Leviticus isn't a narrative book. It's not part of the story. It's not part of the story. It fits, and we'll show you where it fits, but it's not part of the story. As soon as we lose the story, we push it aside. We say the same things that our teenagers say to us when we drive to Mass. This is boring. How does this fit into my life? This doesn't fit into my life. And our kids are right. We need a story. We need to be a part of something. And when that doesn't work, we look to different alternatives. Another alternative. Here's another one that people like to use. We can't read it cover to cover, so we do this. All right, God, speak to me. No, you do better than that. I did this in high school. Before my track meets and my games and stuff, I would do this, it's going to be a sign. I'm going to open up to the right page. And I do that, I'm like, no, that's not it. And I flip to the next page, and I know there's a verse in here somewhere about running. Oh, here it is. And then I go tell my friends, I'm like, I'm going to have a great day today, because I open up the Bible, and it's right on this page, it says, run the good race, fight the good fight, It's a sign, And we treat it like a magic book. Like we can just somehow flip it open, and there it is. That's kind of what we do when we go to Mass. It's kind of what we do. Most people have a favorite movie. And if you were to walk in a room and your favorite movie was playing, you'd probably sit down and watch it. Like, oh, I love this part. You sit down and watch it. Why? Because you already know what the characters are. You already know what the story is. But if you walk into a room and somebody's watching a movie you've never seen before, you're probably just going to walk out. I don't know what's going on. If you've never seen Star Wars and you walk into that movie, you're like, what's with the little trash can guy? What's with the little green sword? Who's that guy in the black? And you leave. You're like, I don't know what's going on. I'm all confused. And if we don't know the story, again, everything in Catholicism assumes we know the story. And when we go to Mass on Sunday, if we don't know the story, it's like walking in the middle of the movie. And somebody gets up there and they read something in the scriptures, and they're like, okay, all right, that's nice. I don't really know the story, so I don't know what's going on. So no wonder we're bored. We have to know the story first. We have to get to know the story. So, again, the story is important. The stories motivate us. And in this study, like I said, we're going to break down the story and we're going to show you how to read it. And all of you have a packet of information here. And in your packet you have a workbook. And the workbook has a lot of different things in it. We may reference it throughout this, but the workbook is mainly for you to take home and kind of read through. There's a lot of discussion questions there. You can use this study any way you want. You know, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to tell you the story. Hopefully at the end we'll have time for some questions and answers. But most of it, you're going to have to go home, you're going to have to dig into it, you're going to have to, maybe read the discussion questions, talk it over with your family or some friends. You can form your own little group, however you want to do it. Some people like to read the story ahead of time and then come listen to it. Some people like to listen to it first and then go back and reread it. And the best way to do it really is to do both. We're going to be doing this for 8 months. If you read 4 chapters a day of this story, you'll read it in 3 months. So, in essence, the average amount of reading you have to do is about 1.5 chapters if you want to read this whole story over the 8 months. So, to read it twice isn't really that hard. Maybe take you 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day. We have to soak it in a little bit each day. It's not going to be much fun if you haven't read any of the story and you wake up the night before and like, oh man, I got to read like 10 chapters. Not much fun. But if you read a little bit a day, you get into the story, the best way I think to do it would be to read the story ahead of time, and that little yellow sheet there tells you exactly what chapters in the Bible we're reading for each session. If you read it ahead of time, then you come and you listen to the story, and you get something like, oh, I didn't see that. And then you go back and kind of reread it, and catch the things you missed when you first read it. You can come and just listen, but you're probably going to think I'm making all this up. It's that unrealistic. So hopefully your eyes will come in context with the story over the next 8 months. It's not that much reading. The average American lives 77 years. And one day we're going to die, we're going to get to heaven, and God's going to be like, did you read my book? What are you going to say to that? I've been pretty busy. I was only in life for 77 years, and I got a couple of pieces of the book here and there in mass. No, we got plenty of time to read this story. You're going to have your whole life to delve into this story. So that's what the workbook is for. You can kind of use it any way you want. We might reference it a little bit during the talks. You also have this little bookmark. We're going to go over this chart here in a second, but the bookmark is very helpful to give you a reminder of what all these colors mean and what the name of all these periods are. But the biggest thing, you also have a little designer jewelry there. I think everybody has a bracelet, which also has the colors on there. And the colors are key, because I said we got this big heap of Catholicism, and we got this big heap of scriptures, and we need to find some way to organize it all. And those colors kind of put everything into a file cabinet. We break salvation history down into 12 periods, 14 books, 12 periods. And each period has a color, and the colors are a specific reason. They help you remember that period. And the nice thing about this is you learn the story, and you go to Mass one day, and the reader gets up there and says, a reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And what do? You're like, I know this part. This is in the Black period, the divided kingdom. It's Isaiah. He's in the southern kingdom. He's talking to the people of Judah. Because you know what's going on in the story. You know exactly who Isaiah is talking to and why he's saying what he is. So these colors are helpful. The main thing you have in there is that fold-out chart. And it looks like this if you fold it all the way out. And you're going to want to keep that in your Bible for the rest of your life. Because this thing is gold. This thing is gold. And it'll show you everything that we're going to be doing here. First of all, the colors. It divides everything up into these 12 periods. The first color is turquoise for the early world, back in Genesis. Think of the color of earth from space, turquoise. Genesis. That's Genesis 1 through 11. Adam, Eve, and Noah. They're all going to be in this part of the story. And then we move on into the patriarchs. The patriarchs are the forefathers of our faith. And this one's dark red for the blood of the forefathers. So crimson, this is Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And then we move forward into Egypt and Exodus. And this is red for the Red Sea, because we know Moses parted the Red Sea, right? Helps us to remember Moses comes in at this time, And then we move on to the brown, which is desert wanderings. Remember they got in trouble, didn't listen to God, and they're in the desert for 40 years. And you'll see numbers play a big part of this story too. Every number means something. And 40 is a time of testing. And they're in the desert for 40 years, just wandering around out there because they disobeyed God. And then we come to the green. The green is the conquest and the judges. The green represents the green hills of Canaan, the promised land. They finally get into the promised land. And that's what the green represents. This is where Joshua takes over for Moses. And then all the judges come, like Samson and Gideon, Deborah, all these judges come because the people just can't seem to learn their lesson. They keep messing up over and over and over. And God allows their enemies to overtake them, and then the people cry for help, and He sends them a judge. And the judge gets them back on track. And this cycle happens over and over and over 7 times. And finally they're like, you know what? We need a king. Everybody else has a king. We want a king. And God, the whole time, He's saying, I am your king. People, no, we want a human king. And God says, all right, fine. I'll give you what you want. In the end, He's going to get what He wants. But he says, all right, I'll give you a king. And that's when the royal kingdom comes. Purple, royal kingdom. This is where Saul and David and Solomon take over, as the king of Israel. And then we come into the dark period, the black. The black stands for the divided kingdom, Israel's darkest days. Israel is the same thing as Jacob, by the way. God confuses us by switching everybody's name up. But Jacob, Israel, same guy. You'll notice that God changes our name because we're called to change. Just like Peter becomes the rock. So throughout the story, don't let that confuse you. You'll see some people's names going to start changing. But Israel, they're known as Israel. And Israel splits. There's 12 tribes. 12 tribes of Israel. We'll learn about those. But 10 of the tribes split off and go north because Solomon just reign of terror and he starts treating the people badly. And then when his son takes over, he says, I'm going to be twice as bad as my father. And the people say, all right, we've had enough. And they separate. And 10 tribes move north into the northern kingdom. And 2 tribes stay south into the southern kingdom. They're called Judah. So this is when the kingdom splits. And this is where all those prophets come, all those prophets. And there's a whole bunch of them. They all have their own big book. A lot of them have a big book. Like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Elijah and all these prophets come. And the reason they're coming is they're trying to tell the people to turn around. Turn from your ways. You're going the wrong way. They're worshiping all these false idols. They're not learning their lesson. And they're warning you, if you don't turn things right, you're going to get exiled from the land. And they don't listen. They don't listen, so eventually they do get exiled. The northern kingdom gets obliterated, and the southern kingdom gets exiled into Babylon. And we call that baby blue. Think of Babylon, baby blue. They're singing the blues because they've been exiled out of the land. And then the king of Persia allows them to return. We call that the return. They finally get to come back into the land and rebuild the temple. And then you have this family called, from Judas Maccabees. They come in and the Greeks take over at this time, and they allow them to stay in the land, but they have to worship their false gods. And Judas Maccabee says, no, we're not doing it. We're going to rededicate this temple to the one true God. And this miracle happens. They only have enough oil to light the lamp for 1 day, but miraculously it stays lit for 8 days. And from here on out, they celebrate that in a celebration called Hanukkah. The Maccabean revolt. And then the Messiah comes. And that's gold. Or the gold, the gifts of the Magi. And then Jesus leaves his one fully Catholic and Apostolic Church to fulfill his mission, the spotless bride of Christ. And that is the church. That is the last period, the period that we are in right now, the church. So you can see the colors and how they kind of help you categorize every point in the story, where the characters fit, where they go. And on this story, you also have the narrative books. It's the second thing down there as you go across. It'll tell you what we're reading as we go. That's what's on your yellow piece of paper there. These are the 14 books that contain the story. This is why we skip Leviticus, because it's not part of the story. And we want to know the story. So this will tell you where to go to follow the story all the way to the end. These 14 books. And then right above that, you see supplemental books. Supplemental books. Every other book fits in there somewhere. We got to know where it fits. For instance, Job. Job fits into the time of the patriarchs. Leviticus, it's right here. In Egypt and Exodus. Deuteronomy, Ruth, You know, you get to all the prophets, and you'll see where all the prophets fit. You know, so every book in there fits somewhere. We got to know where it fits, and that's where that supplemental book will help you. So then you can go back later when you're reading those supplemental books, you know a part of the story you're in. It makes more sense if you know who they're talking to and what time period it is and what's going on in the story. Okay? And then you have God's family plan. You'll see the covenants that God makes throughout the journey. You have one holy couple, one holy family, one holy tribe, one holy nation, one holy kingdom, one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And we keep breaking these covenants over and over and over again. And God keeps making new covenants with His people. And this center area here is kind of like the storyline. There's a lot of neat stuff in here. First of all, this is the land. And we can follow along where the story takes place. 90% of the story takes place in the Promised Land, this land of Canaan. You know, the land that God promised to Abraham. And you can see where we're at in the story as we go along. This red here is the bloodline of Jesus, all the way from Adam. It's the seed of the woman. We're following the seed. We're following the seed looking for Jesus. And we follow it all the way to Jesus. So this seed is where they're at. They start up here in the north, they come down, they get into the Promised Land, they get exiled, come back in, they're in the Promised Land, and then you can see here where they get exiled, up out of the land, they get to come back. So you know what, location is important in this story. And this is one of the materials that they have available for this Bible study at Ascension Press, but it's really neat. It's a Bible map, so you can see, different maps of the world today and the world as it was when, Abraham was here, the world as it was when all these different time periods occurred. So you can put it into real life. It comes alive a little bit more when you have a real location to see where this is all happening in the world as it is today. So location is important in the story. And then you have world power down here. World power plays a huge role in the story. God uses the secular world in this story a lot. And you'll see Egypt is world power for a long time. And again, the world power changes, and the world power plays a big part of when the people get exiled, when the enemies take over, how God spreads His messages, how the roads are built, how communication happens, And it's neat how these world powers come at just the right time and spread this single language throughout the world right before Christ comes to spread His message through the world. So world power plays a big part of the story. And then down here you have secular history. Just so you know that we're not putting this in a vacuum, that real time is happening. The Great Pyramids are built. All this stuff down here that's going on in the world at the time that the story is taking place. So you know that these are real events in a real time period. So this chart is gold. Keep it with you all the time. You can always reference to it. You can always know what part of the story you're in. So our goal here is not to memorize a bunch of scripture verses or to be able to decipher the books of the Bible from beginning to end or anything like that. It's not just a head thing, We're going to learn the story, but it has to be more of a heart thing. God's not after your head. He's after your heart. And this is like His love story to the world. This is His message to the world. God wants all of His people around the dinner table, He wants to be with His children. I know growing up with my own father, it seemed like he would do crazy things to get to where we were at. When I was in college, I was trying to do 2 sports at once. I was playing hockey and I was running track. And his best friend was a pilot. And he did everything to try to make me happy because I wanted to do all these things. And I get all upset because I had a track meet in Ohio and a hockey game in West Virginia on the same day. And he talked his friend into flying me from my track meet to my hockey game. And one year, the national championships in track were on the same day as the league championship in hockey. And I was all upset about it. And he calls his friend up. He's like, well, we can get you there. We'll fly you from your national championship to the hockey game. I was like, Dad, it's kind of a hassle. He's like, no, it's not that far out of our way. I'm like, Dad, it's in Nebraska. calls me up. He's like, oh, we're going to try to make it through. I'm like, Dad, turn around. You know, it's not that big of a deal. And a couple hours later, I get a phone call. It's, oh, we booked you a flight. We'll meet you in Pennsylvania. Okay. So I meet him in Pennsylvania, and I got to play my hockey game, and I played the worst game in the world. I actually felt guilty that my parents went through all this trouble and booked these flights for me to go play this game, and I was awful. And I sent this email to my mom, like, I'm sorry, and all this stuff, and she's like, you know your dad, he just wants to be there. He just wants to be there. And I never understood this until I had children of my own, you know. Father, they just want to be with their children. And God wants to be with his children. He'll do whatever it takes to get them all around the dinner table again. He'll do whatever it takes. And sometimes we think that we're just little old me. How can God possibly care about me? You know, in the story of Adam and Eve, I'm not really Adam or Eve. I'm more like tree number 4, you know. Just over here in the background, just kind of hanging out. Not really part of the story, you know. But as you read this story, you're going to discover that sometimes the scriptures are really speaking to you. And sometimes they're really speaking about you. And you're going to realize that every character in this story is put there for a reason. To act as a mirror. To teach us something about ourselves. And you're going to realize that you're more like Adam and Eve than you thought. That you're not tree number 4. And that your role in the story is significant. Your role is significant. So, as we go along, you can ask questions, and sometimes the answer to my question may be, does anybody know the answer to this question? Because I said I'm not a Bible scholar. I hope you ask questions, and if I say something wrong, I hope you raise your hand and say, nope, that's not right. Thank you, because I'm not a Bible scholar. And, we're going to learn this together. As I said before, the best way for me to learn is to teach it and to go over it. The best way for you to learn the same thing. We're going to learn it together. We can have a discussion. We can ask questions. And again, hopefully we'll leave a little bit of time at the end to ask a few questions. So as we end up for today's session, we're going to end with a song. We'll try to end each session with a song, because I'm not very good at spontaneous prayer, and they say that singing is praying twice. So we're going to do this.